You want to wait?
Senator Sears?
We are live.
Yes. Okay, good. We're now taking up the confirmation of Judge. All right. So is there anyone in the room who would like to offer testimony either for or against or whatever before we hear from the judge?
Senator Sears, are we talking about senators or other witnesses in the room to testify?
Witnesses in the room.
I don't think we have any, Senator Sears.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we have any witnesses.
Okay, good. Then I guess, is Jennifer there and wants to speak?
Yes.
Good morning.
This would be a good time, Judge. Good morning, Judge.
Morning. And so first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for spending as much time on my confirmation as you have. I appreciate the process, and I appreciate you listening to all of the witnesses and having us back 3 times. I really do appreciate that. I have prepared some thoughts on some of the things that were raised during the testimony that I'd be happy to share with you, or if you'd like to just ask me questions, I would proceed that way as well. I'd like to utilize the committee's time in the best way the committee sees fit. So if there isn't an opposition, I can't
to hear from myself. I would like to hear your thoughts on some of the criticisms that have been sent to us regarding your confirmation, but also anything regarding a lot of good things were said too. So, I mean, it cuts both ways.
Okay. So there was a lot of discussion initially about my prosecution style and some comments about the backlog. And I just want to make clear that when I was elected as the state's attorney in Orleans County, I was recruited by the community and law enforcement. They were very dissatisfied with the current state's attorney who was up there. I ran against 3 other men who were within the community, including the incumbent, and I ran on the position that I was going to hold people accountable for their actions in the community, and I did that. The state's attorney prior to me chose not to charge categories of crimes, and that was upsetting to the community and not something that I did. And so I took office, and I was reelected 2 times after that to serve my constituents who were happy with the performance that I was providing. I think it's unfair to correlate the number of crimes that are committed within a community to a prosecutor. I think there's a lot more that goes into why crimes are being committed than simply the number of filings that exist. You all know, I'm sure, that crimes are reported to the police, investigated by the police, then submitted for prosecution, then filed with the court. During my time as the state's attorney, I increased the usage of diversion and restorative justice. Every year I sent more cases to restorative justice programs and diversion than I had the year before. I talked to you on the first day about how I helped create a sexting specific diversion for youth. And I think one of the letters outlined from one of the restorative members that I sent so many cases to Rep Board that they had to create new panels. So I worked really hard to use the restorative tools that were provided to me in my prosecution, Tamarack and otherwise. And in 2022, a quarter of the misdemeanors that were filed went to diversion in Orleans County. There was also some discussion about bail or conditions of release that were imposed. And what I would mention to that is, and I'm sure most of you know this, but before bail or any conditions of release are imposed, a prosecutor asks for them. They're allowed to present evidence or argument on that request. The defense attorney has the opportunity to respond, and then a judge imposes whatever condition or bail is appropriate. I sat in front of 7 different judges in Orleans County who sometimes granted the bail request that I made and sometimes did not. I used the tools that were available to me within the statutes. I used my discretion, the wishes of the community to try to protect the public, and that's what I did. I also took an oath as prosecutor to uphold the Constitution, and I was responsible to my constituents. And I now have taken an oath to be a fair and impartial jurist and somebody who's going to uphold the Constitution, and I take that incredibly serious as well. In terms of the backlog, we've been in unprecedented times, and I think the committees are hearing testimony about this in other arenas. But in Orleans County, the courthouse was shut down for over 23 months. And far after other courthouses in the state had reopened, we were not reopened. And we were told, even in those 23 months, that the courthouse in Orleans County was going to be closed indefinitely. There was no plan to reopen the courthouse at that time. We were told it was not safe, that the space was not safe, and that it was unlikely that we were going to be able to resume trials in that community. So I took a public stance with, well, I had multiple communications, first with the judiciary. I offered alternative locations to have jury trials. I researched with realtors in the area other places we could have court. I spoke to the judiciary about these options. I testified in front of the Senate last year about the backlog and the need to reopen. And finally, I took a public stance with the defense attorney about how we needed to get the courthouses back up and running in Orleans County. And so I took a position that was strong, and as a response to the position relating to the backlog, cases were dismissed for a lack of speedy trial. But ultimately, because of the public pressure and the testimony and all of the things, the courthouse reopened. And first we did jury trials out of county. We did them down in Caledonia County. We weren't even allowed to have trials in our own county because we were told the building was not safe. Eventually, and even when we did reopen, the courthouse could only accommodate picking one jury a month. And that's not enough. And so when looking at the backlog for the last several years, the COVID pandemic, the Orleans County Courthouse all played a really significant role on our ability to reopen. And so that's what I would say about the backlog. I do want to address the firearm incident in Orleans County. I think that's important. I want to be careful with my words because I want to protect the employees' personnel rights as well as protected health information. I want to be absolutely clear that the incident occurred after I left the office, after the then state's attorney, Attorney Leyva, had learned that there was a firearm, and she had explicitly told that employee not to carry. And so this incident occurred after all of that. But I want to be clear, we worked in a profession where we received death threats regularly. We received letters with explicit details about my child, where he went to school, his age. I received explicit death threats. So did my employees. We dealt with people who were angry at us and angry about the work that we were doing. And so I say that because I think it's important to understand the fear of the employees in looking at this scenario in its entirety. And so there was this, I'd also just note that even since I've been on the bench, the state police have investigated at least one, if not two, death threats that were made to me based on my prosecution, still going on. Even now I've been away from that office for several months. So there was an instance where there was an individual who was escalated in our office space. We occupied the 4th floor of the building. The employee was talking to the member of the public. They were posturing, they were making threats, they were upset. This was observed by the employee in this incident. And he stood during that incident and sort of listened to make sure everything was okay. But after that incident, he said to me in passing, and there were at least 2 other employees present. One was a male deputy state's attorney, and I remember my assistant was there too. But in passing, he said, "Could I carry a firearm to protect the office?" And I said to him, "I don't have the authority to allow you to carry. I don't have the authority to allow you to carry." And that was the end of the conversation. We didn't have further conversations about carrying a firearm. I never saw that employee with a firearm. No employee ever came to me with concerns that that employee was carrying a firearm, and I've never seen any of my employees carry a firearm. But I understood the fear and I understood the desire to sort of protect us. This employee was a career veteran, someone who had been an Army Ranger, someone who had spent their entire life and career protecting the country and everybody else. And so that comment to me was not something that gave me pause. It didn't cause me concern at the time. I had no reason to believe that that employee was a danger to any other employee or the public. And I felt like it came from a good place of wanting to protect us. But the bottom line, what I told him in front of other employees was, I don't have the authority to allow you to carry. As a manager, I'm concerned that that occurred. If it occurred while I was in office, I take those concerns very seriously. This whole incident I thought a lot about and I take very seriously. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about individual criticisms that came in from different attorneys, although I'm happy to answer any question about any letter that exists. I do think it's really important. There was somebody who testified in front of you last week who said that I had made a professional responsibility complaint against them. And that was not my memory. So I reached out to the Professional Responsibility Board and confirmed with them that I have never filed a complaint against that person. And I have a letter from them, if you guys would like to see it, that confirms that I never filed a professional responsibility complaint against that attorney. So now I went back and I searched through all of my documents and all of my emails all the way back to 2014, which is where we're talking about. I did draft a letter to my supervising attorney about some concerning incidents that had occurred with that attorney. I'm happy to discuss them if anybody sees fit, but things that an incident that had happened that I was unsettled by the time I was a newer attorney, and I wrote a note to my boss at the time about that. And so if that made its way into something, I don't know, but I did not make a complaint, and I have no idea what complaint is there. I also talked to the Professional Responsibility Board this week after I'd asked about the complaint and just about the process, because there's strong language about being exonerated. What does that mean? And so I wanted to make sure I understood the process. And so complaints come in, they're screened. They could be dismissed or referred to disciplinary counsel for review. Even if they're dismissed, that doesn't mean that there's not a discussion with the attorney about not doing something again, or that even if it didn't rise to the level of a disciplinary action, that it doesn't. I think in the email that he sent to me is we don't ever use the word exonerated. And so I just think it's important too to understand that there are different options when a complaint's filed. It could be dismissed, there could be a verbal reprimand, there's a diversion program that they do with attorneys, all the way up to a private or public reprimand. And so I don't know what happened. If there was a complaint, I assume there was because he testified to it. It's not by me. And I don't know what happened with that because it's confidential. So I thought it was important to note that. I also take seriously all of the critiques or criticisms that have been received in the letters. And while I largely disagree with the categorizations in some of those letters, I take that seriously, and I will use that going forward to make sure that I'm the best judge that I can be in this position. I think it's incredibly important to recognize that I've been on the bench. I've been doing this job for several months, and I've been doing it successfully in family court. I've been sitting on restraining order cases, divorce cases, parentage cases. I sat some in criminal court, family cases, juvenile cases, a variety of cases, mental health cases. And I've spent my whole career advocating for other people, women, to get them into other positions of power. I've advocated on behalf of my employees in different ways. And I take really seriously serving my community, and I hope that I'm confirmed and I have the opportunity to continue to serve my community in the position of a judge.
Senator Sears, I think you're muted.
Of course I am. Thank you, Judge. I have a couple of questions. I thought that it might have been Erica Mathich that filed the complaint against the attorney who spoke while you worked for Erica, I believe. That I don't know if that clears that up or not. Secondly, I Just a question about several letters have raised issues regarding your husband's tenure as a Vermont State Trooper. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yes. So I don't know if Erica filed the complaint against that person. It's possible. I haven't had a further discussion with her about that. I do know that there were other attorneys at the time who had concerns about that same attorney. So I don't know if my information was compiled with others and submitted or what occurred there. But I was able to go back and find the letter that I had drafted to Erica about the instances. As it relates to my husband, I think that a lot of the people have said and agreed that it would be unjust to hold me accountable for the actions of somebody else. And I believe that's true. And so first and foremost, I love my husband. I support my husband. He's a great father, and he has always stood by me, and I stood by him through his process. I believed that he deserved a fair process through the labor board. There were hundreds of articles, and the statements that I made were that he deserved that fair process, the same process that we expect in a courtroom. He deserved a fair trial. The other comment that was cited out of all of these articles was something about one of the civil lawsuits that sort of paralleled the labor board. And at the time, they had just printed the filing from one side, and the state hadn't had an opportunity to respond. And I encouraged the public to wait until there was a response to both sides and then to make up their mind. These are actions of somebody that at the time I wasn't married to. We weren't married. These happened about a decade ago now. And he paid a very specific consequence for his actions as a state trooper. He's no longer employed by them. And those actions don't define him, and they certainly don't define me now. I've worked very hard every day in one of the least diverse areas of the state to increase diversity in my office, in my community, to advocate for minorities, to advocate for trainings within the department. There were instances where employees, multiple of my employees, some that Attorney Lever talked to you about last week, but others where people were blatantly subjected to racist attacks in the courtroom. And I spoke out to the judiciary, I spoke out to the defender general and the defense attorneys, and I've worked really hard to show who I am, and my accomplishments really speak for themselves. And I'd ask that the committee look at my accomplishments, what I've done for the people of my community, for other women, the minorities that I've worked with, and judge me based on that, and not judge me based on the actions of someone I was not married to at the time that happened over a decade ago.
Thank you. Other questions for the judge?
So I just want to, can I make a general comment? So,
Yeah, but if there's specific questions, then we need a discussion before we vote. But go ahead and make, please do.
all right. I just want to first thank you for testifying today and responding to some of this. I just wanted to say, on the record, over the last several weeks, I've gotten lots and lots of correspondence regarding this confirmation, both from defense and prosecuting attorneys in Windham County and from attorneys outside of the county. And I want to say that the vast majority of the feedback I've gotten has been positive, and there has been that fraction of negative feedback. We do have an inherently adversarial system. And I appreciate some of the concerns that were raised, but it was also, to be frank, a little frustrating to get testimony that was clearly that clearly would be considered hearsay or irrelevant, or things that would create unfair prejudice. It's, for example, the issue regarding your husband. I don't find that it makes sense to transfer responsibility onto the judge for his actions about a decade ago. And that's just one example. So beyond that, I just want to say the vast majority of feedback I've gotten has been positive. And I take that into consideration, and in weighing the pros and the cons, I'm planning to vote yes.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Mahalski.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge, for being here. I am hoping that you can help me understand your position on police accountability and how you see the judiciary's role in that.
So as a judge, I believe it's the judge's responsibility to make sure that there aren't instances of bias, that those issues that are raised by defense attorneys and even not raised are taken really seriously. And I would absolutely and will absolutely do that when issues are raised in front of me. I think it's a judge's obligation to ensure a fair process. And one of the things I was talking about was there was an instance in a courtroom where a member of the public accosted somebody on racial, very racist terms. And at the time, the judge didn't intervene, the judge that was providing. And as a response to that, I ordered the transcript. I provided that to the judge, and at the time it was a different chief judge, but provided it to them and just asked that we could do better in terms of training and accountability. And so I've taken proactive steps. I continue to take, I will take proactive steps in my role as a judge. I want to make sure that bias has no place in our courtrooms, and that's something that I take very seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to make a similar comment. In my years of confirmation, there are judges that I've been worried about, and I'm not worried about you, Judge, but sometimes I wondered about certain defense attorneys, for example, who would then take on becoming a judge, and some of them have been the most fair judges that I can remember. Same is true with former prosecutors. The same is true with people whose specialty had been in civil court. And we wondered how they would deal with things in criminal court. And I think the reverse is true for you. You haven't had a lot of experience in the civil courts, but I'm sure that the training and et cetera that you get will be fine. So one particular letter and one particular witness that we had, David Slay, I thought put it very well, and he blamed the legislature for giving you the ability to use certain tools to aggressively prosecute certain offenses, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to comment that I found his testimony and his letter particularly helpful in making a decision.
Senator Sears?
Yes.
Yeah, are we in the discussion period now?
Yeah, we're still in discussion, but I don't know if the judge wants to comment on the lack of experience in the civil cases. I just found that to be one of the other criticisms, and I kind of reject that because over the years I've found people who never had experience in the criminal docket to be able to handle it quite well once they had the proper training.
What I would say to that is there's not a single attorney in the state of Vermont who could walk into the bench and be proficient in every type of case in every area of the law. And that I have experience now in family court and mental health court and restraining orders and criminal law. And some of that I talked to you about at my first hearing that I hadn't done before. And now I feel proficient in those areas and confident in those areas. And I'm confident if there's a new area or a new type of case that comes in front of me, that I have the ability to do the research, I have the resources and the support of other judges to learn about that topic and to preside fairly.
Senator Sears, I actually have a question, mainly out of curiosity. So there was a nominating committee, right, that started this process. Was this amount of feedback provided to defense attorneys around the state during that nominating process?
So the nominating process isn't public in terms of the judicial nominating board. It's a bipartisan committee that has members of the House of Representatives, senators, There's 3 delegates from the governor. There are 3 attorneys, including a defense attorney on that board. And they do interview process, then it's submitted to the governor, who then also checks references, people within the community. So there's 2 sort of vetting processes, and when the Judicial Nominating Board does do their application process, they don't just call your references, they ask every reference to provide references, additional people that you never knew were going to be called. So I guess there is sort of that blind factor to that, where those references and then additional people that you had no idea were going to be called were called, and each of your 4 references provide those types of references.
I served on the Judicial Nominating Board for 4 years, and it is a very thorough process. And sometimes people are deemed to not be qualified, and they never get to the governor's office. It's only those that are deemed by the Judicial Nominating Board that get there. It is fairly exhaustive. I found it to be a very time consuming because of the number of references you had to check. Any other comments, questions? Judge, thank you very much.
Senator Sears?
Yes,
Just wondering, would you like to have the judge step away and then have committee discussion?
yes,
Okay,
if there isn't.
thank you. I would like to begin discussion if I might.
Sure.
So I also want to thank the judge and say, number one, I'm sorry that it stretched over 3 hearings, but number 2, I think that's been a good thing. I think it's allowed us to hear the range of commentary that was out there and vet it and come to feel comfortable about the decisions we're making. So, I, along with my colleague, Senator Hashim, I plan to vote yes on your confirmation. I will say that there were things, I hesitate to call them allegations, but characterizations of your work, et cetera, that I wanted to hear a little more about just because they were in the record, and there were things that are of importance to me. Making sure that bias is not a factor, making sure that firearms at the courthouse are treated seriously. And it is my sense from you absolutely that you do take those things seriously, and going forward that will be the case. And that's reassuring to me. The other thing I'll say is, in terms of people characterizing your work as a prosecutor as overly aggressive, or as a judge as overly aggressive, if I myself were on the bench, or if I myself were nominating, I might do different things. But that's not my role here as a senator, I don't think. The governor was elected resoundingly. He has the right to nominate from those choices given him who he likes. The nominating board, after doing their work, has their right to bring forward their candidates. So I would not be voting no on a judge unless I felt that a mistake had been made and the person was going to be a detriment. And I think you've handled this process ably and with great poise and grace. So with that said, my concerns have been satisfied, and I plan to vote yes.
I'll chime in also. I think most of us have received many different texts, emails, so on and so forth. I like to refer to it as the good, the bad, and the ugly. But during this whole process, watching Judge Barrett, sometimes it's not always easy to take criticism, which we've all encountered at any given point in time. But I was watching her body language for the profession I used to be involved in, obviously, and she remained steadfast. I liked the way that she conducted herself during these hearings. And I was concerned to begin with because of some of the negative feedback we heard, that she may be thinking about changing how she does things as far as addressing every issue that comes to her courthouse. But And listening to her today, I'm quite convinced that she will stay steadfast in her procedures, and I appreciate that. So you all for speaking her yes for me.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Senator Bohowski has a
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I have no previous experience to base this confirmation on, this being my first, but I do find it troubling that historically judges have not gotten adequate scrutiny. And we know that we have judges that have done harm on the bench and that there is bias in the judiciary. And so I also have to echo that I think it is actually a good thing that we fully fleshed out and had a real conversation, that we should do that in the future, because it is a serious position that can do immense harm. And frankly, we don't talk about the bias in the judiciary enough. We focus a lot on policing and a lot on but we don't take enough consideration into that bias. So I appreciate the judge answering those critiques and the work that you have already done to try and answer that. And I too got many letters, and some of the critiques give me serious pause and concern about impartiality and an alignment with a system that, in my view, should be moving towards reparation and restoration rather than retribution. That said, most of my concern has been answered, and what remains is somewhat nebulous. And so I will vote yes, but I hope that there is an openness to growing with a system and continuing to challenge places that are simply not right.
Thank you. I don't want us to forget we have another nomination to vote on as well for the Human Rights Commission. But is there a motion to report favorably the confirmation of Judge Merritt?
I so move.
Senator Baruth has moved, and Senator Sheem has seconded. Peggy, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Peggy, could you please call the roll?
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Norris,
Yes.
Senator Bihufsky,
Yes.
Senator Hashim,
yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. I will, since Jennifer worked in Bennington County and is now in Windham County, happy to report her to the floor. So Peggy, you'll have to just send it up to the floor for me.
Okay.
The next confirmation is,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
congratulations, Judge.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate all of your time. Thank you.
I'm sure I'll see you in Windham County.
Hopefully before you take one.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I don't, hopefully as a lawyer, not as a defendant.
I'm embarrassed that I don't have the first name with me of the nominee for the Human Rights Commission.
Nate Bessio.
Nate, thank you. I knew it was Bessio. Is there any discussion on the confirmation of Nate Bessio?
Senator Sears, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this a reappointment?
It's a reappointment. Yes, you're correct.
Typically Nathan.
Is there any discussion on the reappointment of Nate Bessio? Is there a motion to report favorably?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Peggy, could you please, is there any discussion? Peggy, could you please call the roll?
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Norris,
Yes.
Senator Bihufsky,
Yes.
Senator Hashim,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. Who would like to report this nomination?
I think if I recall, Mr. Bessio lives in my district, so I would be happy to do it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Anything else, Senator Sears?
No, I think I thank you all for this great week. We did a lot of good work, and hopefully next week we get a